Let's throw some jabs.
The fight starts now!
All right, Sergio, it is officially official. Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin, September 17th, the third installment of this epic trilogy. 168 pounds for all the titles at super middleweight. This means that Canelo is bypassing an immediate rematch with Dimitri Bivol. Is that the right decision by Canelo?
Yes, it's the right fight, and everyone knows it because they're going to be fighting for all the belts at 168 for undisputed. So they're fighting for all the marbles, all the belts, and Triple G will be going up to a weight division where I think he's going to be more comfortable now that he's older fighter. Everyone wants to, rag on him because now he's 40 years old, but he's coming off of an impressive victory. Yes, he's looked vulnerable, but what fighters do not look vulnerable the older they get? Canelo has looked vulnerable. He's coming off a loss versus Bivol. So I think this fight is exciting because it's just, they're rivals, man. Anytime you have two guys that have this bitterness towards each other, this familiarity where they know each other so well, they're tired of each other's faces. And trilogies usually end in decisive manner. And it's usually with guys that are past, their good days. I mean, the greatest trilogy of all time, The Thrilla in Manila in 1975. Ali wasn't in his prime. Joe Frazier wasn't in his prime. We got history. We didn't need Wilder and Fury, the trilogy. We got the fight of the year. I think that's where we're headed here with Golovkin and Canelo because they know each other too well. They're bound to just explode on each other. I'm excited. Everyone should be excited. Forget the haters, man. This is going to be history.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to disagree too much on this topic. This makes sense for Canelo from a boxing perspective because he's returning to a weight class he is more comfortable in. If we learned anything from that fight against Dimitri Bivol, it's that Canelo is not a full-fledged 175-pounder. 168, for now anyway, is probably his ceiling. It makes sense from a financial perspective. There is no more marketable fight in boxing right now than Canelo Golovkin Part 3. Some of the boxing purists out there will point out that Golovkin's 40 years old and Canelo is still in his prime. This is going to be a heavily favored Canelo type of fight. But the mainstream boxing fans, the average boxing fans, the ones that paid big money to watch the first two fights between Canelo and Triple G on pay-per-view, they are going to be interested in seeing these two settle this rivalry. On top of that, the loss to Bivol might have increased the intrigue even more. Gennady Golovkin, even though he has looked vulnerable in recent fights, is 4-0 since he lost to Canelo back in 2018. Meanwhile, Canelo ran straight through the super middleweight division, but he's coming off a fairly decisive loss to Dimitri Bivol. So some might look at it as the playing field being leveled a little bit. And you mentioned the weight. It's remarkable, quite frankly, that Golovkin has made 160 for the vast majority of his professional career. Almost all his fights have come at 160 pounds. But moving up in weight makes this fight a little bit more interesting. Maybe Gennady doesn't have to cut weight quite as much. Maybe he's not as vulnerable to those body shots quite as much. Just makes it a little bit more interesting between these two guys. So yes, smart move by Canelo Alvarez. Dimitri Bivol, he's going to be there down the line. Gennady Golovkin, settle that business now.
Yeah, and look, I agree. Canelo's going to be the betting favorite, but Golovkin is going to be fighting for a chance at undisputed. And yes, he's been a career-long middleweight. Those extra pounds actually help an older fighter. When you don't have to dehydrate and dwindle down to a weight that you've been, fighting your entire career, you can apply muscle. You can actually work on your body instead of just the training, instead of just the technique and the punches and everything else. You can work on your body, your size, your strength. These are things that Golovkin hasn't had the advantage to do at 160. So 168 is just going to make sense. Both these guys know each other too well. It's going to be explosive. It's going to be a marketable fight. Like you said, man, it's going to bring the casual fans. That's what matters. That's what matters when it comes to these big events where the world is watching. You need the casual fans. You need the mom and pops. You need the young, the old. You need everybody. And that's why this fight's one of the biggest fights in boxing.
Yeah, Gennady Golovkin, one of the longest reigning middleweight champions in boxing history, has never been undisputed. Gets his chance to be undisputed at 168 in just one fight.
Very few fights can be called super fights. This is one of them. Both men are firing what they've got.
This is a draw.
There has to be a rematch.
And new WBC.
There's a score to settle.
There's real bad blood here.
Everybody wants to fight, right? He took a lot of shit.
I don't want talking with him. I want to fight.